you, Luke. I appreciate that. Okay. How's everybody doing? Yeah. So if you listened closely at the beginning of my intro, you will hear that I'm originally from Texas. Don't hate me, I did leave, so there's that. But I mentioned that simply because I spent my youth in water all the time. Like, we had a swimming pool. My dad took me out to the lakes to go, fishing, and I was just always in water, always. And so it's only fitting that I got the kind of the role of a lifetime in my new position as the director of Project NePTWNE at Gannon University, and I really appreciate the Jefferson offering me the opportunity to share with you what Project NePTWNE is all about, because I understand that the title is a little like, what does that even mean? So NePTWNE does stand for Nano and Polymer Technologies for Water Networks of Erie. Ultimately, what I think of as the kind of the vision of Project NePTWNE is to create a community of Lake Erie stewards through education and engagement. So we want to get people engaged in understanding water quality and understanding Lake Erie and understanding its role within the Great Lakes system, and how anything that we do here doesn't stay here, right? Water connects us all to each other. Anything that happens here travels through Lake Erie. It travels over Niagara Falls, into Lake Ontario, out the St. Lawrence River to the North Atlantic Ocean, which connects to the South Atlantic Ocean, which connects to the Pacific, right? And so water is connecting anything that we do here to everybody else on this planet, right? And getting people to understand that through engagement with data, right? At the beginning of the summer, I had a bunch of my colleagues on a phone call. We were talking about the data that we want to present, and somebody said, well, what's the story we want to tell? And I said, oh, hold up. We're not telling a story. We're sharing data. And from that data, we want people to ask questions. We want them to seek out answers. We want them to think about, what does that data mean to them, right? So we can show you how a harmful algal bloom always starts on the western basin of Lake Erie and moves east as the summer progresses. And the intention of that is to make you go, why? Why does it always start in the western basin? And then we can show you on all 5 of the Great Lakes how harmful algal blooms happen. And you can maybe go, oh, wait, Lake Superior never seems to have harmful algal blooms. Why is that? Let's look at some of the other data. Let's look, maybe it's connected to currents. Maybe it's connected to water temperature. And through that process of engaging with that data, you start to answer the questions yourselves, right? That's the intention. It's really to get people more connected to science and how science happens in the real world, right? For adults to reconnect with that child in you that was always asking questions, usually to the annoyance of your parents who are like, oh my God, I don't know where that word came from. Like, how am I supposed to, know everything in the world, right? And so a lot of times as we grow up, we stop questioning things, right? But science starts with simple questions. And that's what we're really trying to do. And through those simple questions, engage people to become stewards of Lake Erie, to think about what they do every day. Oh, I'm going to go outside today and water my lawn. How does that affect Lake Erie? Well, if you're putting fertilizer on your lawn, that could become runoff, especially if it's going to rain later today or tomorrow morning, which it is, right? And if you put a bunch of fertilizer on your lawn today, tomorrow morning when that rain hits, most of that fertilizer is going to end up in a storm drain. And that storm drain leads directly to the lake. It doesn't go through a wastewater treatment plant, right? And that adds to harmful algal blooms, right? So getting people to think about that, because oftentimes we feel very disconnected, right? And so that's really what this is all about. To do this, we think of, so I love the Trident because it represents the 3 pillars of Project Neptune, which is to measure, mitigate, and manufacture. So those are really kind of the 3 primary foci, I guess, of Project Neptune. And our mission is through this, those measurements, through mitigation, through manufacturing, to improve water quality and revitalize Erie's economy, because these things are all connected, right? So that's ultimately what Project Neptune is. So what I want to talk to you now about is like how we are currently doing these things and what we see as the future. So in terms of measurement, right, we have the Environaut. This is actually both kind of a current and a future, because we have the Environaut as this beautiful like 1956 tugboat that we have repurposed into a research vessel. It is currently out of the water. It has been well loved and well used, but not necessarily well maintained. So it's currently out of the water, getting some good and necessary repairs done so that we can continue to use this as a research vessel to do the measurements that we want to do. Primarily, I think this vessel is really good within Presque Isle Bay. On a very calm day, maybe you could take this out on the Lake Erie, but you're definitely not going to do multi-day excursions aboard this vessel, and so we'll get to that later. So that's our kind of primary tool right now for measurement. On the mitigation front, with the Regional Science Consortium as a partner, we almost a year ago, we opened the Gannon greenhouse, and you're like, well, what does that have to do with mitigation? Right, but what we're primarily growing within our greenhouse are native plants. So plants that are acclimated to this region, that are designed to live here and have over, generations really taken to our climate, to our weather patterns, right? So these native plants that we're growing here that we then use in restoration efforts out at Presque Isle Bay and other. They do an annual native plant sale, right? And, this again is also both a current and a future. Where I really see this going is we're looking at a partnership with the Erie County Technical School and growing the idea of going native Erie. So making native friendly businesses. So Erie County Technical School, Gannon University, we have some other collaborators in our West Bayfront neighborhood. So planting natives. Instead of that butterfly bush that's invasive, why don't you plant this plant that looks similar but is native? And a big part of that is educating landscapers, right? A lot of landscapers just don't know, why you would choose this plant over that plant, right? They've just been exposed to, oh, you plant this and it looks like this, right? And so through the partnership with the Erie County Technical School, kind of growing that educational outreach into the landscaping community from the bottom up, educating 16, 17, 18, 22-year-olds and every age in between. I skipped some years there, I know. Kind of educating them so as they go out into the workforce, they can bring that understanding of the importance of native plants to the community, right? I can tell you when I was looking for landscapers, I couldn't find a single landscaper who specialized in native plants. And the reason I mentioned the butterfly bush is because I ended up with 2 butterfly bushes in front of my house and then found out that they're really bad for butterflies, which is really ironic, right? And how would I know that, right? I'm not a plant person. I grew a little human, but she's only 5'2", so maybe I didn't do a very good job on that. But I can tell you one thing I'm not good at growing, and that's anything that's green, right? So you really need to kind of educate landscapers, because they help people like me who I want to hire somebody to do that. I know I'm not good at it. I want to hire somebody, but you need to have people that have those skills, right? And so working, through opportunities like this and understanding that native plants aren't just good for pollinators and all of our critters, but they're really good for water quality, because they help to filter water before it makes its way to the lake. And so making that connection then too. And then on the manufacturing front, 2 years ago, we opened the Gannon Makerspace. Not sure if anybody has been up to the 6th floor of our iHack building. If you're you fidget with things at home, you like to make things, this is like Toys R Us for adults. It's got a woodworking shop, a metalworking shop, 3D printing, you name it, they have it. And they do all sorts of things, from collaborating with industry to make not 500, but maybe 50 of an object. They do a lot of 3D printing, or if you're like, hey, I have this idea for this product that'll help to mitigate some issue that's going on in terms of water quality, they can help you to prototype that and bring it forward to manufacturing. Right? And so this is kind of really what they specialize in. It's so much fun going up there. I collaborate with them quite a bit. So the future, where are we going with all this? I already kind of touched on some of it. I mentioned, though, on our vessel front that we have a little tugboat, but we want to expand our vessel fleet. And I see this largely happening through partnerships, because owning a boat, if anybody owns a boat, is expensive. So, for example, we're partnering at the Bayfront Maritime Center. They have been working to reconstruct the Porcupine over a decade plus. They're pretty close, but not quite there. So we've written a grant to hopefully get the rest of the money they need to get that vessel finished and do science under sail. That's my favorite way to do science. Sometimes you have to be on a diesel engine tugboat. I get that. But it's so much better to be out on the water and not hear an engine, right? And to be using the wind as your guide. And so I really want to get the Porcupine finished. It has berthing decks, so we can be out on the water for multiple days, and really be doing some really impressive Lake Erie science under sail. And I'm not opposed to having a submarine. So if anybody has a submarine that they're looking to pawn off, let us know. All right. And then this is probably, if you've heard anything about Project NePTWNE, it's probably this center that you've heard the most about. Our Center for Lake Erie Education and Research that is currently being constructed within the Blasco Library. CLEAR is the acronym. So this center, it's going to open. I'm so excited. Like every day I get to make decisions about this. Earlier today, we were talking about our glass wall. I got to decide if the panels will open backwards or forwards. It's just these, like, every day I'm like getting decision fatigue, because it's every day. It's like, well, what color should this be? I don't know. No, I always have opinions, so that's never an issue. So it's really, really exciting. This is like my obsession of the day, every single day. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about this. So I'm really excited to share with you kind of what this is going to look like. So I know that there has been, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have about our center, but let me walk you through it. So it is within the Blasco Library. We have leased about 3,300 square feet of space from the county, which, by the way, is 3% of the library's footprint. 3%. When you go in the main entrance, maybe I have a laser here. Oh, nope, that's not it. It's the middle button, which would make sense. There we go. If you go in the main entrance, right, there's 2 sets of double doors, and then you have the doors into the library. This is the circulation desk. So you walk around the circulation desk, and this is where the center will be, is in this 3,300 square feet. Currently, there are temporary walls up on both the north and the west sides to decrease the impact of the construction on the library patrons. What else did I want to say about this? Before we took over the space, this was the only piece that was open to the public. This little square here. So about 1/4 of the space was actually open to the public. As I walk you through this, I want to point out that half of the space will now be completely open to the public anytime the library is open, which is 66 hours a week. Not that that stresses me out at all. It's fine. It's all good. The education lab that we'll walk through is it's moderated in terms of who has access to it. It's not completely off limits to the public, but it's moderated access because it is a lab, after all, with a lot of microscopes that are very expensive. So we can't just have people walking in there willy-nilly and breaking, $10,000 worth of microscopes. Okay, so so we'll talk about some ways that space can be accessed for the general public, but it's not completely off limits. So let's walk through it some more. All right, so this is kind of the layout of the overall space. We have an interactive exhibit space. We have the NOAA Science on the Sphere. Then we have our education lab. All 3 of these, like I said, these 2, the interactive exhibit space and the NOAA Science on a Sphere, are completely open to the public anytime the library is open. The education lab is moderated. The only piece that is completely off limits is the wet lab, and that's intended for research purposes, right? And so when I say off limits, it's available for researchers, not just those at Gannon, but those from other institutions can apply to do a research project within that space. And our new website will give them access to a form to submit to say, hey, I want to do, plankton research in your wet lab. How do I reserve that space? This is what I want to do. This is how long I need the space for, things like that. And the way that our exhibit space, is set up is that we're going from the hyper-local at this end to the global as you walk through the space. Okay, so there's an intentionality to how the space was created. So when I say hyper-local, that's our bookshelf wall. So this is the separation between our center and the library. So it's a bookshelf. Isn't that cute? Kind of clever. The library side of the bookshelf just looks like a bookshelf, and they have books on there. Our side is intended to be a rotating exhibit space. So in this first year, I'm creating 4 different exhibits for that bookshelf wall. Next year, I'll create 3 more, and we'll have 7 in total. Next year, I'll create 2 more, and we'll have 9 in total. So that, kind of over time, we're building out our collection of rotating exhibits that will be within the bookshelf wall. So our first exhibit here, as part of the Jefferson Global Summit, they are featuring a movie called All Too Clear, a documentary called All Too Clear that's about invasive mussels, how they've cleared up our water, but that's not good for the fish populations. And specifically, they connect it to the whitefish populations that have been completely decimated by the invasion of the quagga and zebra mussels. So that is going to be playing on Friday, November 5th or 7th, whichever one is a Friday. And we're going to have the documentarians here, and I'm going to interview them. So as part to connect what we're doing in our center to what's happening at the Jefferson, our first exhibit is going to be about native and invasive mussels. And you can actually watch the trailer for the movie on one of the monitors that is within the bookshelf wall. But it will introduce you to the 23 different mussels that are native to Pennsylvania Lake Erie waters. Isn't that cool? Who knew? We're going to get 3D prints of some of the mussels so you can actually touch them and look at them and see their colors. and all sorts of things. I have lots of plans. So this is our local, our hyper local. This will connect our second exhibit within this space is in conjunction with the Erie County Conservation District. And they're creating a whole citywide awareness project called Hidden Creeks, and it's about how the Mill Creek flood of 1915 led to the tubing or burying of Mill Creek and Cascade Creek in order to avoid impacting, right, the flooding that can affect and devastate communities. So they buried these waterways, which sounded like a good idea. But remember when I was talking at the beginning about how we're disconnected from the water? And part of that is because we don't see it. Most people don't even realize that storm drains go directly into Mill Creek or Cascade Creek and directly out to the lake without ever hitting a wastewater treatment plant, right? And so that second exhibit is going to be about that flood and the hidden creeks of Erie, Pennsylvania, and specifically connecting to that, like, sewers do not go to a wastewater treatment plant. So that, you know, that can that you see sitting, teetering on the edge of a storm drain that eventually gets flooded into it, that just ends up directly in our lake. Or I said can, most often it's a bottle, actually. The number one thing that we find when we look in our storm drains are bottles, plastic bottles. High up there is dog poop bags. So anybody, I'm waging a war against dog poop bags, which is not to say don't pick up your dog poop, just don't throw them down the storm drain, please. Sorry, that's my own private little thing. Okay, so that's the second exhibit that's going to go in our bookshelf wall. So that's our hyper local, right? So connecting with what's happening, what's important to our community, and a lot of that will be happening through partnerships, right? So the invasive mussels, that's in partnership with PAC grant and in connection to the Jefferson Education Society. The second one is in collaboration with the Erie County Conservation District, right? And so thinking about, you know, these connections, I'm really big on partnerships. Really big on partnerships. So that's our hyper local bookshelf wall. And then we have the Lake Erie table. So you can kind of see here, but in the floor of the center, we have all 5 of the Great Lakes inlaid into the floor. This was set a couple of weeks ago, and it's beautiful. So beautiful. And then we take Lake Erie, our Great Lake, and we literally put it up on a pedestal. Because it's our lake, right? And it is on a pedestal. It is in my heart. And so we put it up on a pedestal. And the top of the pedestal is our lake, and it is a relief map of Lake Erie. Now, if you expanded X, Y, and Z in all the same amounts, Lake Erie, it has a depth of about that. It's a very shallow lake. So we accentuated the Z axis, the depth of it, so that the maximum depth ends up being about 6 inches in our map, to really show you the detail and give you a chance to tactilely touch and feel the lake and its depth. And Greg got to see a preview of our first etching of this, and he was amazed at the detail. He's like, you can see the dumping grounds. It's so cool. I fish those all the time. So really nice detail in this, and it'll give you a chance to touch it. And then what we're doing, I mentioned data earlier, we're projecting down onto the table different sets of data. We have 13 different data sets that our software developer is currently working to project down on this table. So some of it is currents, some of it's temperature, lake temperature, and those are real-time data sets that we're getting from the Center for Great Lakes Research in Michigan. So we're pulling that data live from on their website. Shipping, little dots to represent the ships as they move through, and that's also a real-time live data set, so we can watch shipping, because I can tell you, living on the shores of Lake Erie for 10 years, I did not realize how much shipping happens through the Great Lakes. And then I sailed all 5 of the Great Lakes, and I'm like, holy cow, there's so much shipping that happens, right? And again, it's that disconnect, because the lakes are so big, right? And you're looking out, you're sitting at Presque Isle, and you're like, I think that's a ship. Maybe it's Canada. Let's see if it moves. We've all done it, right? You're all like, is it moving? I don't think it's moving. I'm not sure. My eyes hurt now. I'm going to go look at the kids again, make sure they haven't drowned. Okay, right? So, so various data sets that we're going to that we project down onto the Lake Erie table. And then I mentioned comparing what's happening in Lake Erie to our other Great Lakes, and probably the best view of it is this one, so apologies. The back wall is a giant, I think it's, I'm not sure if it's 1 or 4, I forget where we landed, but it shows all 5 of the Great Lakes. And so any data that we can look at for Lake Erie, we can look out for all 5 of the Great Lakes on our Great Lakes wall. And these are all operated by kiosks, which, yeah, so you can see a kiosk here, and there's one that's over here too that controls the Great Lakes wall. And then you see the kiosk that connects to probably our biggest feature, which is our Science on a Sphere. So this is a NOAA product. It's a 6-foot orb that appears to be floating in the center of this room. It's actually held up with like fishing line, 3 fishing lines. It's very lightweight. And then there are 4 projectors at the corners of the room that project onto this white orb 600 different data sets of global data. So we can do anything from just looking at the planet to looking at the planet at night to watching sandstorms, nitrate movement, phosphate movement. I mean, it's kind of incredible the amount of data that they have available. And one of the things that I have to do in the next few months is, you know, it's almost too much data, is pull down kind of some cool data sets. And basically the kiosk will have kind of rotating data sets that you can look at. In addition, what we can do with the Science on the Sphere is facilitated programming. So you put together, they're called playlists of different data sets, and you have a facilitator who kind of talks about, you know, how you're connecting the different data sets to each other and what they tell you, right? Kind of walks you through a little bit more of a story. For that facilitated programming, we do have a glass wall that will close to decrease the noise penetration to the rest of the library. So we can open it when there's no facilitated programming going on. People can interact with the Science on the Sphere themselves with the kiosk. We can close the glass door, and we have an iPad to do facilitated programming. When the iPad is turned off, the kiosk is shut down. So nobody that's in, nobody can mess with the program as you're trying to walk through the facilitated programming. All of that, everything that I just shared, is open to the public anytime the library is open. And there will be a representative from Gannon University in that space at all times, because it's a lot of tech. And I don't want the tech to break. It's also just good manners, right? But I'll be honest, as soon as they started talking when I got the job a little over a year ago, and I was hearing about all the tech, I was like, oh, there's got to be a person there at all times, right? So I have various students, I have student interns, student workers that will be in the space anytime the library is open to engage with the public, answer questions, walk them through, make sure that the equipment is being used properly. And what you can see in this image too is we have a glass window that looks into the education lab. So the education lab, as I mentioned, this is moderated access, right? It's not completely off limit to the public, but it's not completely open to the public. So an example, I mentioned I love partnerships. I'm part of the Pennsylvania Lake Erie Watershed Association, PLUA for short. One of the things that PLUA does is to go to the various tributaries to Lake Erie and do monthly water sampling. And we have kits to do this. The issue we've had is that we have no place to store those kits. We have no lab to do the chemistry that's associated with doing that water quality testing. So literally, people have been holding the kits in their houses, and then when they go on vacation, they have to find somebody to give it to, or it just doesn't happen that month. We had people who were doing the monitoring of one of the creeks. It's the one near Presque Isle, that was going to the McDonald's on Peninsula Drive and sitting in the little area, and that's where they were doing their chemistry, is in the McDonald's. That's not a good idea. And I'm kind of surprised that they never got kicked out. I think they were also surprised that they never got kicked out, to be honest. Fortunately, nobody sits in a McDonald's anymore, so they were probably like, oh, wow, there's people here. Who knew? So I mentioned that because now, since I got this job, I'm like, guys, this is great for us. We can store the kits in the center. You can come and check out a kit from the library, go do your water quality, and then come back here to do your chemistry, and then put the kit away, right? So working with the library on lists of who can check things out, who can get into the lab, right? And then people basically show their library card or their ID, and they can get a key card, an electronic key card, to gain access to the lab, right? So that's an example of a partnership and a way that community groups can use this. I was also just talking with some teachers recently, and they were talking about a book club that they do, and I was like, oh, well, you can meet for a book club in our lab, just don't break any of my microscopes, right? So it doesn't even have to be science related, It can just be, we want to have a group meeting, and we don't have a space to do that, right? And this can give you access to that space. And then we have our wet lab. So as I said, this is the only place, if you haven't noticed, this is the only place in the entire center in which there will be water. I just want to point that out. No aquaria in any other part, right? So all of the books are over here. No water in any of this. The only water is along this wall, as far away from the books as it can possibly be. And we have a big ass drain. So should something happen to those aquaria, that water is not going anywhere outside of this room other than down that drain. The lip is actually raised a little bit so that it's almost like a tub, so it will hold any water. But so that's our aquaria systems, and this will allow us to do mussel research, fish research, plankton research, right? Various research projects that we need to do within controlled environment we can do within this wet lab. And the plan is that, doing all of this over the next few years, we're building towards the creation of what I call Lake HEAL, or a Lake Health Environmental Analysis Laboratory, that will connect all of this to each other. So I see that as, and probably there might even be multiple locations, but I see this as both a research lab as well as a lab for hire, right? So I get asked all the time, I haven't talked about plastic pollution, but that is my area of expertise, right? And people ask me all the time, they're like, can I give you a water sample and you test it for microplastics? And I say, no, that's not what I do. Right? So there is no lab out there right now that you can hire to do something like that. So if you wanted to know how much microplastic was in your tap water, there's no lab that you can go to and hire to do that. So this is, a part of what I see Lake Heel being, is that kind of, I want to hire you to do this, to analyze this sample for this contaminant, and we would be able to do that. In addition to just that kind of basic water quality monitoring that happens as part of Lake Erie, right? So, so we're looking to grow towards that. As we move to the future, right? But we really have to establish ourselves now and then grow towards that, is how I see that happening. And as I mentioned, this will have an explicit focus on plastic pollution. So, I'm doing okay on time, so that's good. I already kind of hinted at some of the things that are happening. It's a lot of partnerships. So we have a really good partnership going with Pennsylvania Sea Grant to do summer programming, largely for teachers. So last year I was on a research cruise. It's a research, the RV Lake Guardian does this science educator cruise, RV research vessel, Lake Guardian. It's an EPA research vessel that moves every 5 years to one of the Great Lakes, right? So 2024 was a Lake Erie year. The next one will be 2029, right? So I think this year they're in Lake Michigan, then they're in Lake Superior, right? So they spend 1 year in each of the 5 Great Lakes doing various water quality monitoring. And during that entire summer, 1 week of it is saved for a science educator cruise. So teachers from any Great Lakes state can apply to be part of this, and they spend, and they select 20 of them. So it's like 20 out of like 150 applications get on board this vessel, and they get to spend a week with scientists like me doing real science with the intention that they bring it back to their classrooms, right? It's great opportunity, and I've been on the RV Lake Guardian twice, and it's wonderful, and the teachers get so excited, and it's really transformative for them. But 20 out of 150 people get selected, right? Like, we need to make that more accessible to more teachers, right? And so I want to kind of create a mini version of that right here in Erie. And this is actually following a model, Inland Seas, this part of Michigan. Inland Seas Education Association does this. And their teachers mostly stay in Lake Michigan. Sometimes they get up to Lake Superior, but they never get into Lake Erie, right? And so kind of replicating what they're doing for Michigan, I want to replicate for Lake Erie here. And I've been very explicit with them. Like, I've talked to them a whole bunch about the fact that I want to mimic what they're doing. And they have shared every single material that they have with me. So they're very supportive of that. So these kind of summer programs that can focus on teaching the teachers, and then the teachers bring that to their students. Doing things throughout the academic year to help them engage their students in what are called meaningful watershed educational experiences, or MeWE's for short. If you're not aware, this academic year, Pennsylvania teachers within Pennsylvania now have different educational standards that are called STEELS, the PA STEELS standards, which stands for, here we go, Science, Technology, Engineering, Environmental Literacy, and Sustainability. Yeah. Starting this year. So they've known about it for 3 years. Problem with knowing about it for 3 years is that it's always like in the future. Like, that's a future me problem. That's a future me problem. Oh, shoot, it's a now me problem, right? And so as part of these STEEL standards, teachers K through 12 have to engage their students in 3 MeWE experiences, kindergarten through 12th grade. Different age brackets, but 3 throughout that entire time span, right? And the intention of MeWE's is that the kids get out of the classroom, get off of their campus, and go somewhere else to engage in water-related activities. Who is working in water-related activities here? Oh, yeah, we are, right? So just yesterday, actually, I was down near Pittsburgh talking with teachers. Last week, I was in front of teachers and talking about how our center can serve as a MeWE site for them. We can help them to meet these standards that they are now expected to meet that they may or may not have been planning for, right? And also talking to them about what do you need in order for that to happen, right? So one of the teachers was like, you need to get in front of the school board. We need more money, right? And so finding ways to help them to meet that, but using our facility, right? So I mentioned Sea Grant here, but also I should have mentioned I'm also working extensively with IU5 and IU9, so intermediate units. These are all the schools have these intermediate units that oversee them. And so I'm working a lot with them and helping to facilitate this type of programming. One example, I'm going to be at the Montessori school here in Erie in September and October and working with the kids in their classrooms this year. But the idea is, right, you start maybe going to them, but then they come to us, right, and helping them to see those connections. And then also working with PAC Grant on research projects. Erie County Public Library is a huge partner. I mean, not only because we're there, but they're just a huge partner, right? So, for example, I mentioned summer sessions up there. We already started. Our center hasn't even opened, and I've been working with Jessica Spitolsky, the director of the library. Tomorrow is our third of 4 meetings around a book and action club. So we have a group of kids, 10 to they're 12 and 13 years old, largely. That we are engaging where they're reading a book, right? So we spend an hour talking about the book, and then we engage them in some kind of activity. So we talked about what a watershed is, and I brought out an Enviroscape, and we talked about how anything that happens on land affects the water. And then last week we went out and collected trash from actually the bayfront right there near the outside of the library. We did a trash collection, and we talked about the trash, which sounds weird, I know, but we were like, is this new trash or old trash? How did it get here? Those kinds of questions, right? And the next thing that we're doing is talking to them about, okay, what's an issue that you see, and how can we work on solving it, and getting them involved in some kind of action around some issue that is water related. So I mentioned the collaboration with the Regional Science Consortium, with the Gannon Greenhouse, and our Go Native Erie project. We have had, some of y'all may be familiar if you've been in Erie for a while, the Regional Summer School of Excellence was a summer program that Gannon ran for a number of years. Became kind of overwhelming for the faculty, and so they needed, it's been kind of dormant, but we're working to bring that back. So we've applied for funding to get that restarted. So this is a week long with the students. Actually, I really want the students to stay on campus, and we're really focusing through the community schools program on the underserved community of Erie, right? Kids that literally live blocks from the lake and have never been to the lake, have never been to Presque Isle. So I want to pull them out of their homes. I want to put them in dorms. I want to surround them with nerdy science people like me and Greg. And I want to show them that this could be a different life path for them, right? How to engage them in this kind of water science and what that can mean for their future. Because I was one of those kids, honestly. So really want to bring that here to Erie. And then actually this fall, we're launching the Erie M3 Challenge. Here, Erie is an acronym, stands for Environmental Responsibility Through Innovation and Education. Measure, measure, mitigate, manufacture. So this is a collaboration between Project NePTWNE and our departments of science and engineering to pull together teams of students that they get a selection of different topics. So they pick their favorite topic and they either design a science project or an engineered solution around that topic. They get to use our facilities and work with our faculty for an entire year, and then they present their outcomes in April. And the top team, every student on that team gets a scholarship to Erie, to Gannon, sorry. We are Erie, sorry, to Gannon University as a prize. So this is something that we're actually starting to launch this fall. I did a lot of talking. I've like overwhelmed your brains, but I'm open to questions that you may have. So thank you all.
Dr. Mason, that was wonderful. I am very supportive of everything you're doing. Could you tell me, though, whether you have any way of addressing the fact that the roundabout will go right at the foot of the library and will reduce the amount of parking? So there's hardly enough parking for library users. Is there anything in your plans to increase parking?
No, I mean, we're reserving space within the library. What I can tell you is that there's actually quite a bit of parking down there. If you
Taking about a third of that parking.
I'm not talking about in front of the library, but to the side of the library, in between. Yeah. So that's actually where I park, and anybody from Gannon, if we're going to the library, we park over there. So I do think there's more parking that's available than sometimes people fully realize. But also in terms of Gannon students and faculty going down there, we're working with EMTA to provide bus service to and from the library. So they're not necessarily, it's not like our students are going to be driving en masse to the library to go to to use the lab or to use the Science on the Sphere for a class or something. They'll be taking the buses down there. So we're also actually, just today, this morning, we put in our application. We're trying to get one of those Friendship Ford transit vans that they give out every year. That's to transport people, because I know Greg, since day one, has been like, we need a van.